Late summer in 1666, and London pulsed with life beneath a merciless sun. The city had endured months without significant rain, leaving timber frames dried to kindling and thatched roofs brittle as paper. Over 400,000 souls crowded into a maze of medieval streets so narrow that neighbors could shake hands across the gaps between jutting upper floors. Wooden houses leaned against one another like old friends sharing secrets, their walls coated in tar and pitch to keep out the damp. Workshops, warehouses, and homes pressed together in a jumble that had accumulated over centuries, each generation building upon the last without plan or pattern. Walk through Cheapside on any given day and you'd be swallowed by the crowd. Merchants hawking cloth from the Low Countries, fishmongers calling out their catch from the Thames, apprentices darting between carts loaded with barrels of oil, coal, and grain. The air hung thick with the smell of sweat, horse dung, cooking fires, and the river. Overhead, painted signs creaked on iron brackets, marking the trades within. A golden key for a locksmith, a striped pole for a barber surgeon, a wooden boot for a cordwainer. In the wealthier quarters near the Royal Exchange, brick facades appeared more frequently. But even there, timber still dominated the skyline. That September, the city lived on borrowed time. Lord Mayor Thomas Bloodworth had received warnings about fire risk, but London had always been flammable, always vulnerable. Firefighting meant bucket chains, leather buckets passed hand to hand from the river or from public conduits. The city possessed fire hooks, long poles to pull down burning buildings and create fire breaks, but they required decisive action and the willingness to destroy property. Property rights ran deep in London. Every building represented someone's livelihood, someone's inheritance. The law protected owners fiercely, making preemptive demolition nearly impossible without clear authorization. Sunday, September 2nd, just after midnight. Thomas Farriner's bakery on Pudding Lane, near London Bridge, was the last place still working at that hour. The baker had dampened his ovens, or so he thought. Sometime in the darkness, a spark found purchase. Perhaps in accumulated flour dust, perhaps in the wooden oven housing itself. A small flame became a creeping glow, then a roaring blaze that sent Farriner and his family scrambling through an upstairs window onto the neighbor's roof. One maidservant, too frightened to make the crossing, became the fire's first victim. At first, it seemed containable. Lord Mayor Bloodworth, roused from sleep to assess the situation, famously dismissed it. A woman might piss it out. He returned to bed, but the fire had other intentions. Fed by that summer's drought and driven by a strong easterly wind, it moved from building to building with alarming speed. By dawn, it had consumed 300 houses and was advancing toward the Thames waterfront, where warehouses stored oil, spirits, timber, and tallow. Everything London needed to function became fuel for its destruction. By Monday morning, London was fighting for its life. The fire had reached Thames Street, where warehouses lined the riverbank like monuments to commerce. When the flames found the stores of coal, tallow, oil, and spirits, the inferno transformed. Explosions sent flaming debris arcing across streets, starting new blazes ahead of the main fire. The heat grew so intense that it generated its own wind patterns, creating what we might now call a firestorm. Molten lead from church roofs ran in the gutters like water. The very stones of buildings cracked and shattered. King Charles II took direct command. This wasn't ceremonial leadership from a palace balcony. The king worked alongside his brother James, Duke of York, organizing firefighting posts, distributing coin to encourage volunteers, and wielding a bucket and spade himself. They established 8 firefighting stations around the fire's perimeter, each commanded by a nobleman or senior courtier. At each post, men worked in shifts, passing buckets, operating pumps, and attempting to create fire breaks by demolishing buildings in the fire's path. But London's layout worked against every effort. Those narrow medieval streets that gave the city its character now became channels for destruction. The wind pushed flames down these corridors faster than men could retreat. Attempts at creating fire breaks came too late or proved too narrow. The fire simply leaped across. Residents fled with whatever they could carry, clogging the streets and hampering firefighting efforts. Some hired porters and carts at extortionate rates. Others stuffed their possessions into chests and dragged them toward the river, hoping for boats to carry them across to Southwark or downstream to safety. St. Paul's Cathedral, that ancient symbol of London's endurance, fell on Wednesday. For days, people had used the cathedral as a warehouse, piling books, valuables, and goods inside its thick stone walls, believing them impregnable. They were wrong. The medieval cathedral, already deteriorating before the fire, contained timber scaffolding from ongoing repairs. When the flames arrived, they found ready kindling. The lead roof melted, pouring through the interior like a waterfall of fire. The stones exploded from the heat. Books stored in the crypt ignited, creating such temperatures that the very paving stones glowed red. Witnesses reported the cathedral burning so fiercely that it could be seen from Oxford, 40 miles away. The Royal Exchange, the Guildhall, dozens of churches, 13,000 houses, 87 parish churches. Gone. By Thursday, September 6th, the wind finally shifted and died. Rain began to fall. The fire had consumed 436 acres within the city walls and 63 acres beyond them. 87 churches lay in ruins. 13,200 houses had vanished. Over 100,000 people, roughly 3/4 of the city's population, found themselves homeless. The medieval city of London, centuries in the making, had been reduced to ash in less than 5 days. In the immediate aftermath, London resembled a refugee camp more than a capital city. Tent cities sprang up in Moorfields, the open space north of the city walls. In Islington, Highgate, and the surrounding fields, displaced families huddled under canvas, in hastily built shanties, or simply beneath the stars. The king issued proclamations opening the royal parks and ordering surrounding towns to take in refugees. Food shortages threatened as bakers had lost their ovens and supply chains collapsed. Charity organizations and parish churches distributed bread and basic provisions, but desperation hung over everything. The destruction created an unexpected opportunity. For years, architects and planners had lamented London's chaotic medieval layout. Now, with 400 acres cleared, the chance existed to rebuild rationally, to create the kind of planned city that continental Europe admired. Within days, Christopher Wren, the brilliant mathematician and architect who had already begun making a name for himself, presented King Charles II with a comprehensive redesign. Wren's plan featured wide boulevards radiating from central points, grand piazzas, and regularized street grids. It was magnificent, logical, and utterly impractical. The problem was property. Every pile of ash represented someone's legal right to that specific plot of land. The boundaries between properties remained fiercely defended even when nothing stood upon them. Owners began clearing their ruins and preparing to rebuild within days of the fire's end. Any comprehensive redesign would require surveying every property, negotiating compensation, and relocating thousands of freeholders and leaseholders. The legal apparatus simply didn't exist to accomplish this quickly. London needed housing immediately, not in 5 or 10 years after legal battles concluded. The Rebuilding Act of 687 represented a compromise between grand vision and practical necessity. It couldn't reimagine London completely, but it could enforce crucial changes. All new buildings must be constructed of brick or stone, no more timber frames. Streets must be widened to specified measurements, the narrowest lanes at least 14 feet wide, main thoroughfares 30 feet or more. Building heights were regulated according to street width, preventing the dark canyons of overhanging structures that had characterized medieval London. The act established a fire court to rapidly adjudicate property disputes, bypassing the normal glacial pace of English law. Coal tax revenue funded the rebuilding effort. Every ship bringing coal into London paid a duty, with proceeds dedicated to reconstruction. This funded the rebuilding of public buildings, churches, and infrastructure. Christopher Wren, appointed Surveyor General, oversaw this massive undertaking, though not the utopian redesign he'd initially proposed. Instead, he focused on what could be achieved: safer buildings, wider streets, and above all, the reconstruction of London's churches, including a new St. Paul's Cathedral that would take 35 years to complete. From the ashes rose a transformed city. The new St. Paul's Cathedral, begun in 1675, embodied London's rebirth. Wren's masterpiece crowned Ludgate Hill with a massive dome inspired by Rome's St. Peter's, a statement of London's confidence and permanence. Its Portland stone gleamed white against the sky, a sharp contrast to the smoke-blackened medieval cathedral it replaced. Construction would continue until 1710, with Wren personally overseeing every detail into his 70s, watching his life's work rise stone by stone. Near the fire's origin, another monument took shape. The monument, completed in 1677, stood precisely 202 feet tall, the exact distance from its base to Farriner's Bakery on Pudding Lane, where the fire began. Its observation platform offered views across the rebuilt city, while Latin inscriptions on its base detailed the fire's destruction and reconstruction. It stood as both memorial and measurement, reminding Londoners what they'd survived while documenting the precise extent of their loss.
The rebuilding transformed more than just architecture. The new London emerged more regulated, more planned, more conscious of public safety. Building codes now specified not just materials, but construction methods, wall thicknesses, and foundation depths. Streets followed roughly their old paths. Too many property rights and ancient boundaries prevented radical redesign, but they ran wider and straighter. The new brick facades, though more uniform, created a different aesthetic. Rows of sash windows in regular patterns replaced the chaotic variety of medieval carpentry. The city lost some character, but gained coherence.
Yet something irreplaceable vanished in those 5 days. Medieval London, with its guild halls dating to the 1300s, its churches built by Norman craftsmen, its layers of accumulated history visible in every street, was gone forever. The city that Shakespeare knew, where Chaucer walked, where centuries of ordinary Londoners had lived and died, in buildings that connected them physically to their ancestors, existed now only in memory and a few scattered ruins. The Great Fire severed that physical connection to the medieval past. But London endured. Within a decade, most of the burned area had been rebuilt. Within a generation, St. Paul's Dome dominated a skyline filled with Wren's elegant church spires. The city that emerged from the ashes proved more resilient, safer, and arguably more beautiful than what it replaced. The fire destroyed 400 acres, but it couldn't destroy London's spirit, its commerce, or its role as England's beating heart.
Standing here now, looking back through these reconstructed scenes, it's remarkable how close we remain to that moment of destruction and rebirth. Walk through the city of London today, and you follow streets widened by the Rebuilding Act, past churches Wren designed beneath the shadow of St. Paul's Dome. The monument still stands, marking the spot where everything changed. The fire's legacy isn't just in bricks and stone, but in how catastrophe forced London to reimagine itself, to build not just back, but better. If there's another moment in history, another city transformed by fire or fate, or another story of destruction and renewal you'd like to see brought back to life, let me know in the comments. Thank you for being here.